Correct. It was driving toward the officers, and I saw the officers have to run out of the way, fire something at the vehicle.
Can you hear what the guy is saying? Are you close enough to hear?
No. Sir, what were you thinking?
They were smashing my windows. They were wanting to hurt me. They wanted to hurt me. I was just trying to get out and save myself.
You didn't try to hit the officers.
I care about all people. This is unacceptable by the community.
Courtesy of NBC Bay Area, we want to thank them for allowing us to showcase one of our distinguished graduates in journalism in action. An Emmy Award winner and certainly one of my favorite students and guest lecturers, Damian Trujillo, joins us today. Damian, how are you?
Thank you, Bob. I'm doing great. You never taught me, though, in journalism school how to cover a riot, so trial by fire.
I'm going to say we're going to have to get a textbook chapter on that going, you know. It's going to be a thing. Before we get started, I want to go back to that day, but before we do, tell everybody what you've been doing since graduation.
Boy, you know, I, like everybody else who graduates, I developed a resume tape. Yes, we used tapes back then. It was 3/4 inch. It was about this big. And I shipped it out to every station around the Southwest. I didn't want to move too far, but I was willing to go anywhere. But, you know, you got rejection letter after rejection letter. Fortunately, the Telemundo station here in San Jose saw my tape and offered me a job on the assignments desk because they saw my tape maybe. But for me, it was a foot in the door. I didn't want to do Spanish news because it was my first language, but I mean, you taught me what I know now in English. And so my craft is in English. But they gave me a shot. 6 months later, they made me a reporter. A year and a half, I left and went to, back then it was ABC, KNTV, and I've been there for since 1996.
Wow. And now in the year 2020, as we record this, you're on the front lines of history, covering the Black Lives Matter movement following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Very quickly before we go back, I have another video clip I want you to talk about. What's it like for you as a person of color to be covering this movement in 2020?
Well, you know, because I am Latino, because my parents were born in Mexico, I think you see what's happening through a different lens than those who maybe have not lived our experience. And so you see it through this other lens where you understand what the sentiments are and what the challenges are in front of all communities of color. And so I think that you're able to present a more cohesive story when you come in with that perspective.
And yet, as you pointed out earlier, we didn't teach you how to cover this kind of a protest, but it is part of the job of a TV reporter in 2020. What are you thinking when you're assigned to go out to a story like that?
Well, I was home, and when my phone rang, I knew that it wasn't good because they wouldn't call me at home unless it was something big. And so when I got the phone call, it was because the protest started at 2 p.m. and by 4 o'clock, they had taken over Highway 101. They blocked the entire highway. They were shattering windows of the drivers who were stopped because they couldn't go anywhere. And so then I knew that it was going to be a long day, a long night, and that it might not be positive. By the time I got to the scene, the protesters had left Highway 101, had gotten on the Alum Rock off-ramp to Highway 101, and that's where I said, boy, we're in for a good one here.
Oh, and were you indeed. Yeah. We have some more video we'd like to share with you now, courtesy of NBC Bay Area, your station, showing an interaction that you had, and also you describing some of the weapons and the things they fired into the crowd. Juan Cerna, let's take a look at that.
Now to keep pushing that line more toward First Street here in downtown San Jose. This is one of, or what remains of one of the rubber bullets that they were firing at the crowd out here. We saw some of the protesters who were struck by these. They have a big strawberry a strawberry, if you will, on their knee or their ankle, because that's where they were struck by this rubber bullet. It does hurt, it does bruise, but that's what they're using right now to make sure that this crowd does disperse, again, more toward First Street.
Very interesting. And again, of course, you're in the middle of this. You're describing something that you said struck you in the back. Is that how it hurt you?
No, it was here's right here. It was a ricochet, and I was fortunate that it was a ricochet because this is what they look like. And
Is it rubber?
It's supposed to be foam. They call it foam projectiles. But what they're supposed to be doing, police that is this is also what they launched.
Wow.
And this is rubber. You can squeeze it a little bit. And what they're supposed to do, the officers, is fire it on the ground, not directly at someone, so that it ricochets and it's not a direct impact. Unfortunately, in some cases, it did not ricochet. It struck, people head on. But to me, it was just a ricochet, and I was fortunate.
Was your photographer hit by this as well?
No, a reporter next to me was hit in the back, and it did bruise, and it stung for a while. But fortunately, and I don't know by what chance, but my photographer and I were not directly hit. And when I say directly hit, Bob, I want to say that it came from both sides. These projectiles came from the police side, but rocks were whizzing past my ear this close from the protesters. And so here I should have been behind the police line for my personal protection, but I got to a point where I couldn't. And so I was right in the middle. I had protesters who, let me show you what else they had. This is what I found afterward. This is called a breaker bar. And I know that because I took auto shop in high school. This is pure steel. And they were using this against the police officers. This was lying on the street as things were calming down. And if anybody knows who it belongs to, I'm willing to retrieve it because it doesn't belong to me. But I'm going to use it now to show what it was like out there, and people understand that really it was honestly at the end of this event, it was coming from both sides.
Both sides. Plus, you had fires in the street and all of that. And our students were out there covering this, as well as professional media, live shots, helicopters, drones. It was quite a visual for the community here in the Bay Area. But for you, you're living it. We don't teach you how to deal with that. Talk about your emotions. What did you feel? How was your blood pumping?
Oh, it was adrenaline the entire time. And my phone, I didn't realize until afterward that I had about 70 text messages. And that was people who were watching the coverage, friends, family, who were concerned. My kids were texting me nonstop. And it makes me a little emotional because, they're at home watching this and they know that I'm kind of in the line of fire, if you will. And they're scared to death at what they're watching. And I didn't realize that until afterward, where I had time to look at my phone. My station was calling me on my phone and texting me, okay, you're on in 5 minutes. I had no way of knowing because
you couldn't hear anything.
I didn't hear it. I have it on vibrate, it's in my pocket, but I had no time to think about that. My head had to be on a swivel the entire time.
Now, as a reporter, you're dealing with another major issue in 2020, the pandemic, COVID-19. How did that play into the tension building on that day on the street?
Well, it got, honestly, that's a great question because it got to the point where I was in the midst of it and you kind of said, screw it. There's a job to do here. There's important news to cover here. I'm wearing my mask. I hope that everyone else who was around me, and there were tons of people, a lot of them were wearing masks, but I hope that they're okay because I'm at the point where social distancing did not exist. Yelling was coming from both sides. You just put yourself at the mercy of God and hope that you come out okay. And I tested negative, so I was fortunate.
And were you tested by the station's requirement or your own choice?
No, I was tested 2 months later. And that's just by choice, just because of, I was considered an essential worker, so I'm out. I'm out in crowds, as we saw. And so, I did worry every day coming home after that. What if I come home and bring it to my family? So I made sure that before I got out of my truck, I disinfected the truck, disinfected my clothes, jumped in the shower, and wash my clothes every single day after this, because, you know, last thing I want to do is bring it home to my family.
Indeed. There's also the tug of war that you have a very good working relationship with the police here in our county and in our city, and certainly the police chief, he raves about you. But then you also have a responsibility to understand the public's anger about Black Lives Matter. How does that play for you as a reporter?
Well, actually it's easy, Bob, because I understand both. I mean, as a minority journalist, you absolutely understand the frustrations and the peaceful protests and the purpose of those peaceful protests. Unfortunately, it started out as a peaceful protest, but it didn't end that way. And I saw the protesters getting in the face of the officers right here and challenging them and getting in their face and throwing things at them and hitting their mark. And as soon as the officers would move in toward one of those protesters, the protesters that I saw were saying, look, 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 he's charging at me. You know, they were being provoked. So I saw that side as well, and it was difficult. I mentioned in one of the live reports that that the live shot you saw there was in front of City Hall, and I said, Cesar Chavez lived so many blocks from here. And for what I'm seeing and knowing the Chavez family as much as I do, they would not approve of the tactics that were being used because he believed in nonviolence. And unfortunately, and I've said this before, that there were some who hijacked the message about Black Lives Matter. They hijacked it, and it became a riot in my eyes, and that was the unfortunate part.
And that seems to be the reoccurring theme around the country, where it starts out peaceful, large groups of people trying to make a statement guaranteed by the Constitution, freedom of assembly to redress grievances, and yet there are always bad actors on both sides, you might say, because quite clearly we saw it on the police side as well as also on the protester side. When you're a journalist, you have to try to stay neutral and report this as best you can. But when you're live in the middle of all this flying around your head, how do you keep your wits about you?
I think you have to remind yourself that you're there as an observer to describe what you see and what you hear. And I tried to the best of my ability to do that. You know, I did mention that I saw batons flying. I did mention that this came close to me. This is called riot smoke. And that's what they're launching. And this is what I was breathing at the time. And it does, your eyes burn, your throat hurts. You got to pour water on your face when it happens. And so you just basically, as a journalist, you're there to observe and present what you see and hear, so the folks at home can understand both sides and understand what's really happening out there.
And that's the key thing. To be a good journalist, you have to talk about both sides as fairly and as equally as possible. I'm going to do that right now and say, in the course of my TV career, I've met a lot of police chiefs. Most of them were very cordial, engaging, welcoming, super friendly. The first one I met in Iowa, and then one of the worst of all time in Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia, where he actually towed the cars of our people at the TV station because he didn't like a story that we did about misbehavior of the police officers.
Wow.
So you get to see it on both sides, and you've had that experience too. How was your experience with dealing with the police affecting your reporting?
Well, I think, like I said, you asked me earlier about being a minority journalist, and I think I can see it through that lens. I think I can somewhat also see it through the police lens. Just full disclosure, when I was in your classes in college, Bob, during the summer, I was a security guard at Great America. And that's where I met San Jose Police Chief Eddie Garcia at the time. He was also a security guard with me. And so I understand there was some bias in the training that they gave us. For instance, we were not allowed to have anyone wearing red or blue on to the park. And that was the edict. Well, they were sued for that, and rightfully so, when they lost that lawsuit, because we weren't letting dads who had families of 8, we can let the whole family in because the dad was wearing blue. Maybe he was a Dodgers fan. And so I see the bias in that sense, but I also see the sense when it comes to law enforcement on officer safety, and how to them that's first and foremost is officer safety. That's why in the video I noticed that there was a line of officers with batons, and behind them were the guys launching these. So the guys would launch these, they'd move to the front, launch them, and then step to the back. And then those with the batons would act as the buffer. But you know, in dealing with about 6 or 7 police chiefs in San Jose, Bob, I had good rapport with all of them, but I was always straightforward with every single one of them. I always told them, look, Chief Lansdowne, I would say, I'm gonna do all the positive stories because you all are doing some great work out there, but I'm not afraid to do the negative stories. If your officers cross a line, or if this department for some reason crosses that line, I'm gonna do that story as well. So just so that we're clear that I'm going to do the good stories, but I'm not gonna pump the brakes and not do the negative stories that need to be told as well.
And that's to your credit, because we teach you that's good journalism. You cannot select out and say, well, I don't want to lose the connection with the police officer. I want to be friends with that police chief. Therefore, I better just kind of keep it mellow and simple. If you do that, we as journalists lose credibility with our audience, and you will also be in trouble with your management.
Well, and I'll give you another example. I mentioned my relationship with Chief Eddie Garcia. He has texted me before after a story that I aired and saying, what the heck was that? So he's disagreed with some of the stories, but we come to the understanding that I have a job to do and he's got a job to do, and we try to do it both, I think, to the best of our abilities.
I think that's absolutely right. If I got a text like that, and I know Chief Garcia now, thanks to you, I got to talk to him, I would text him back and say, I'm eager to hear your perspective. Share with me more. Let's tell a more balanced story. Mm-hmm. We have to get away from this notion of, well, I don't want to be criticized. I don't want anybody to say my reporting wasn't the best ever. We never get it best ever. We try to make it balanced, accurate, and fair. That's our goal in journalism, and that's what we taught you at San Jose State. Let's go back to the fun side of your job now for a little bit. You have the craziest workplaces. You sent me photos of where you're typing your stories and you're half dressed with formal and wearing shorts on the end. And I'm thinking, this looks like the COVID-19 period of reporting. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's really weird. You're looking at my home studio right now. I have a show that airs every Sunday on NBC and on Telemundo, and this is my home studio. I do that on Wednesdays, but it's changed. COVID has changed the modus operandi at NBC Bay Area dramatically. I haven't been to the station physically in about 2 months. Everything is done virtual now. A lot of the interviews that I do are now the way we're doing this segment here right now. I don't ride in a news van with the photographer. I take my own truck. We have an extended stick where we attach the microphone to make sure that we have 6 feet of separation with those who we are interviewing. We're wearing masks all the time. They supply us with disinfectant and wipes and everything. We rarely now do live reports. Everything, unless it merits it, it's not live. It's taped just to make sure that we're in and we're out.
Right, safety first.
Right.
And people don't seem to realize you have to get out of the house to do the news sometimes. In fact, most of the time, if you're going to do it right. You can make phone calls and do Zooms all you want, but sometimes you have to be on the scene of a fire or on the scene of a story, and that puts your life in jeopardy. So some of our students looking at this might say, then why in the world would you want to be a reporter in the year 2020 or beyond?
It's fun, Bob. I mean, it is fun. I mean, there's a Spanish word and it's called chismoso. And it's kind of like a gossip monger. And I was born a chismoso. As a kid, I was chismoso. I wanted to know everything first. And I wanted to be the first one to tell people what I knew. That's what chismoso does. I'm just
my producer loves that.
I'm just right. The only difference now is I'm a professional chismoso. I mean, I still want to know what happens first. I still want to be the first one to tell people what it is that I know. The only difference is where you're a kid and you're a kid chismoso, you kind of bend the truth. Now it's got to be factual. It's got to be fair. But I still want to be first.
I can relate. I was like that. My mother used to say, you have this thing about truth telling. You ought to do something in that area. Well, I hope now in heaven she's praying for me because I'm always shooting off my mouth about get it right, do it fair.
That's
But
it. And that you mentioned that I want to wear that badge about being fair and honest. And the minute that someone feels like I wasn't, that I take it home with me. I wear it on my sleeve because that's not what I got in this for. That's not why I'm in it. I'm in it to be fair and balanced. And the minute someone feels that I wasn't, then I take it personal.
And one of the realities about COVID-19 that I'm hearing from a lot of my former students working around the United States, one in particular was telling me on the East Coast where he works as a photographer, there are reporters who don't want to be sent out on the street. They'll make their phone calls, they'll do their Zooms, but they're saying it's unsafe for reporters, not every reporter, just some, but we're finding that most of those reporters are either young or shortly out of college, 5 to 6, 7 years, and they don't really want to put their life in danger. And they're telling management, I'm not going to do that. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you might have to rethink about your profession because you have to be where the action is. You get a third dimensional sense on what is really happening. At KTVU, the Fox affiliate here, they do not send their reporters out. When I'm at a story, the photographer will have their telephone out, and that's how they'll listen to the press conference or whatever it is, and they'll ask questions that way. But in my personal opinion, they're missing half the story. You have to be there. You have to be where the news is happening.
And yet technology makes it possible for us to tap into the global movement of Black Lives Matter. I've talked to students in the Middle East, former students. I've talked to a former student in Spain. I'll be talking to one in Germany soon. They're all telling me that the world is into this too. It's not just in the United States. How does that make you feel that you're really the first authors of history in the making that this might actually happen this time?
Yeah, I haven't even thought of that. It hasn't even crossed my mind. All I know is that the way I'm doing the news now is just a little bit different than I've done it before. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me to stay home and do my interviews the way we're doing it now. I get to spend more time with my family and whatnot, but that's not why I got into this. No, I got into this to be out there.
Right, and the cause is important. There's no doubt about it. As an African-American, I applaud you for what you're doing, and I encourage you to stay safe. And yeah, I'm one of those people that will text you when I think something you should hear about. But having said that, talk about the family environment. Your wife is a former student of mine also. Mm-hmm. She understands your job. Your children are trying to understand why they're hurling rocks at daddy. How do you take time to explain it to your mom, your dad, your family, your friends, that this is part of what I have to do?
Yeah, the fortunate part is that, my wife understands completely. When I'm sitting at my desk and my news director comes to my desk and says, what are you doing right now? And I'm writing my script. And he says, well, that's good because your flight leaves in 3 hours and you're going to a different state and you don't have a return flight. So you don't know how long you'll be gone. And, my wife understands that. Other family members who aren't as attached to this industry, they get worried. My kids get worried. When I got home after that May 29th, 2020 incident in San Jose, I got out of my truck and my kids ran to hug me and, in tears because they were lucky. And so what I did, Bob, is I went online, I went on Amazon, just, I guess for peace of mind for them and for me. And I got this.
Good for you.
And that's just to protect myself because, it came awfully close. And I'm not talking about rocks that were being launched. They came awfully close. And that's just my way to protect myself and my family to know that I'm doing my best while I'm out there. But no, your family's always in the back of your mind. Fortunately, they know that what the job entails and that I have the job to do and someone's got to do it.
Do you see yourself enjoying the industry enough to stay in it the rest of your adult working life, or do you want to do something more with your career? Have you started planning?
So I haven't started planning it. It crosses your mind, when you're working holidays, when your phone's going off on weekends, when you don't know which of the holidays you'll be off, either Thanksgiving or Christmas or neither. You don't know that until the fall, so you really can't plan. And so that's when it crosses your mind, how much longer can I do this for? But when I'm touched by families who I interview, whether they're heartbroken or they're celebrating something, and they find it in their time to give me 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it's so rewarding. And to be able to tell their stories and to know that if not for that family, for that community, maybe I made a difference. I brought a smile in what might otherwise be a sorrowful situation. Boy, it's such a joy. But there's nothing also like beating the competition. When I can burn the other stations and know that it's because of my hard work and diligence and your training in school that I'm able to do that. That's such an adrenaline rush.
Well, it gives me adrenaline rushes to hear you all say that I didn't screw up your life. That's the best part about it. I really love that.
That's part 2 of this.
The next segment we'll do.
Yeah.
But behind me, I put on the screen just one of the many. We have hundreds of students who've gone on to have great careers in advertising, PR, and journalism. And I can speak in journalism to the many of you who have won Emmy Awards over the years, and you're one of them. So congratulations on behalf of your university. We're very proud of you. But it's not about the awards, is it? It isn't the motivating factor to get you up in the morning.
No, it's good. It's not. The awards are great and they feel good. Honestly, I've gotten awards from community groups, grassroots groups, and those are the ones that really mean a lot, because this is coming from folks who might not understand the industry like my colleagues behind you there do. But they see something in the message that I'm bringing, in the stories that I'm reporting. When the community rewards you for that, Bob, it's you realize that you are making a difference. You're doing something good.
That's absolutely true. And now I'm going to make you tear up a little bit. I'm going to say it this way. You and I both lost a very good friend and a former teacher of yours and a colleague of mine last year, Darla. And she taught you television news, and she taught you well, and she absolutely loved her students. You were on that list of love, by the way.
Thank you.
We want you to know that we live vicariously through you, not only through the text that we sent you, but also just by watching you grow and expand your knowledge and be willing to share your experiences with the community and the world. You're making a difference, even if some people call us fake news. That nonsense drives me crazy as an educator when someone labels the truth as fake. How does it bother you? Does it trouble you?
Oh, it hurts. It hurts because they're trying to demolish what the pillars of this industry developed, and journalism, the true meaning of journalism. But you have to kick that aside, because even though they try to bring you down that way, you still have to march to the beat of the drum, and there's a higher calling, and that calling is to the truth and honesty. Know that when they talk about fake news, they're not talking about you, because at least not your students, Bob, because I know the integrity and the character of you and Darla and everybody else in that department. You trained us well, and you trained us to be honest and truthful, and we're marching to the beat of the drum that you gave us.
Well, I'm sorry that COVID-19 prevents you and many of our other graduates from coming to the classroom. You've always been very giving of your time. You've always answered the call every time I've asked you. You've enabled me to reach special guest speakers that I've been wanting to get into the classroom. I thank you for that, and San Jose State should publicly thank you as well. You're one of our champions. We're very proud of you, and keep up the good work, but by all means, stay safe.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. I appreciate the time. I'll always be a Spartan, proud to say it, and I'm proud to be a product of the journalism department at San Jose State.